Thank you everyone for coming to this webinar about the proposals to regenerate the Grafton Centre in Cambridge. My name is Francis, me and my colleague Cameron hosting tonight. Before I introduce all our other speakers from the project team, let me just explain how this is going to work. We're going to do a presentation to start with about the proposals, and then that's going to be followed by a Q&A session. If you have any questions for us, please can you type them as we go on into the Q&A box. Down at the bottom of your screen, you should see a tab called Q&A. If you type your questions in there, we will be able to see them. We've already had a lot of questions in from the public, and we're probably getting more as we continue. So I'm going to allocate them into themes, so you might not hear your question asked exactly in the wording that you give it to us, but hopefully we will cover all the topics and subjects that get asked. So let's start by introducing the team. Subjit, do you want to introduce yourself to the public?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Subjit Jassi. I work for Trinity Investment Management and the Pioneer Group, and I'm responsible for leading a lot of the work that happens for the Grafton Shopping Centre, coordinating the team, as well as dealing with existing tenants. So I've got principal contact with a lot of the councillors, and we might be meeting some of the residents as well in the near future. And John.
Good evening, everybody. My name's John O'Shea, and I am the Centre Manager of the Grafton Centre.
And Jonathan.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jonathan Bainbridge. I'm a member of the planning team at Bidwells, and we're appointed by Trinity IM and the Pioneer Group as planning agent.
So Cameron, do you want to share the presentation and we can start? Great, thank you. Just want to move forward one onto the agenda. So just to repeat, any questions, I know some people have already started using it, please hit the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen there. And then the second half of the session, we will get around to answering those. So do you want to move on, Cameron? Okay, Subjit, do you want to introduce your company?
Yeah, so Trinity Investment Management are a real estate investor and developer, and there is a specific division of that called the Pioneer Group, which focuses exclusively on life science. So we build spaces for tech and science companies under the Pioneer Group. Not only do we build them, but we operate and manage them thereafter. And one of the differences between us and other landowners and developers is that not only do we develop these spaces for new businesses and other science and tech companies, but we have two key categories that make us different. One is the fact that we have a network of about 250 industry experts that we use to help small startup companies grow, and they've got access to that network. And we also run a venture capital based business, a much smaller business, to look at ideas from people as well as universities and students, and help grow them into a small business. So no other company in the UK, and we think no other company in Europe, offers the real estate side, the venture capital investment into small businesses side, as well as this expert network to help small businesses grow. Pioneer Group has got about 10 locations throughout the UK. And we think there's about 6,500 people working across the portfolio and the sites. The building shown there is called the Royal Exchange in Manchester, which was a listed building that was converted and refurbished into office space and retail space. So we've got experience of dealing with town centre regeneration and development as well, which is very valuable at Cambridge. And when we look at the science and tech centres, I mentioned we've got 10 different locations around the UK, which is shown here. We have the full spread of businesses, from startup businesses to medium-sized businesses and larger entities as well. And in all of these locations, we are either working with little incubators in each individual site, or looking to put incubators in there. And we also run a series of events to help the small businesses grow as well, teaching them skills about how to be a CEO, etc. as well.
So, John, are you going to tell us a bit about the Grafton Centre and how it's currently doing?
Absolutely, Francis. Before going any further, just a little bit of background on me. My retail career started in Cambridge in the early 1990s when I was a sales assistant at both of the M&S stores in the city centre. I then returned to the city in 2011 to manage Grand Arcade, and in 2017 I then moved over to the Grafton Centre to manage the redevelopment at that time. I love this city, I understand this city, and I understand its retail landscape. The retail landscape has shifted quite considerably since I started in the city in the 1990s, and that pace of change has increased incredibly in recent years. The big changes that have occurred recently are fundamentally online shopping and also COVID. And one of the effects of COVID is that retailers are reviewing their store portfolio quite considerably. Some estimates indicate that some stores nationally will reduce the number of stores that they have by 40%. And you can see that effect both nationally and locally. Vacancy rates, which I'll come on to in the Grafton Centre, have increased considerably, but vacancy rates across the city have increased. And you'll have noted, some people have noted that Lion Yard's application, planning application, which was recent, which was retail and restaurant dominant, now includes an area for offices, which is partly to do with the retail demand. The vacancy rate within the Grafton Centre, so the total footage that is vacant retail and restaurant wise within the Grafton Centre, is currently 44%. 44% of the centre is empty, not trading, and it's getting worse. Over recent months, 7 retailers and restaurants have either closed or have served notice to leave shortly. And some of our retailers are saying that due to the decrease in footfall within the scheme and the lack of growth in sales, some retailers are saying that they are unable to pay us a rent going forward. All of those factors mean that the Grafton Centre needs to change. And there are many shopping centres like this across the UK. But fundamentally, for the Grafton Centre to survive and thrive, it needs to be mixed use. It needs to be mixed use to create jobs for our local community. And in turn, that job creation will support the local businesses around us. Jonathan.
Thanks.
Thank you, John. So just to talk through the scheme, there are 4 key elements which make up the highly sustainable project. The first is focusing on the retail, and we're looking to retain retail at the western end of the centre and to create a new retail loop. You can see that on the plan there in the green on the left-hand side of the plan. The second element is to retain both the cinema and their gym in their existing locations, and to deliver new F&B on the southern side of the cinema. You can see that the cinema there just in the pink, and then the F&B that will be
food and
complement.
beverage.
Forgive me, sorry, yeah, I'm speaking in jargon. So food and beverage, like Nando's and such like, to the south of it. The third element is a significant enhancement of the public realm, and there are various different parts to that. Not only improving the facades of the buildings to create active frontages, but to deliver a richer and nicer environment for pedestrians and cycles. And you can see through the retail loop there that we're proposing a new public square, which is designed to encourage dwell time. On East Road, we're proposing a new linear park and extensive highway improvements. And there's a new landscape provided on the link north of the site, Fitzroy Lane, to the main access to the western car park. 2/3 of the most challenging elements of the retail floor space will be converted to science and technology uses. And that's the area that you can see there in blue. The majority of that area is retained structure, Some of the existing building will be demolished to the foundations and slab, but those will be retained. And that's where we need to incorporate additional flexibility. And there is no basement within the scheme. You can skip to the next slide, please, Francis. So as John noted, there are significant challenges in the retail environment currently, and our scheme is looking to hit that head on. We will be reducing the amount of retail floor space to about a third of the existing, which is approximately 100,000 square feet. Within that, we will create smaller, more sustainable shops with a view to providing the centre's existing tenant space. The recently refurbished elements of the mall will be retained and supplemented by small additions, as you can see in the plan on the right-hand side of the screen. The retail loop connects Christchurch Street to Burley Street and is designed specifically to increase footfall through these key retail locations. And that's absolutely fundamental to a sustainable retail environment. And at the heart of our retail offer is the intention to maintain value and convenience. We've already confirmed that we'll be retaining Decathlon within the centre, and we're in discussions with many of the other existing tenants. I think hand back to John just to discuss the cinema and gym.
Thank you, Jonathan. Move on to the next slide, please, Cameron. Thank you. Let's initially just talk through this artist impression on the right-hand side of the screen. This artist impression shows a potential entrance building to our science and technology area. And the building on the left-hand side of that image is the cinema. In effect, what that image shows is a potential entrance building that would be built across approximately 50% of what is currently the bus turning circle. The bus stops would move onto East Road. That would make the bus services far more efficient because they wouldn't have to waste time trying to get off East Road and then trying to get back onto East Road to continue its journey. We fully appreciate and understand the importance and the popularity of both the cinema and the gym, and they would be retained as part of the scheme going forward. In addition to that, our proposals show an area which is set back slightly from East Road, which will be the home to a number of restaurants for our local residents, for our workers, and for also visitors to the cinema. And on top of that, our proposals are looking to improve the cycle lanes on East Road as well, as we all understand the importance of cycling within Cambridge. Jonathan, I think I'm passing back to you now.
Thank you. So improving the streets and the pedestrian routes in and around the centre is fundamental to what we're doing. We understand that connectivity is key, and the quality of the environment within those routes is a priority for local people, and in particular for improving connections for pedestrians and for cycles. We recognise that the building has turned its back on the public realm, and when you're walking around the outside of the building, it does feel quite a hostile place because it's quite hard. There is no overlooking. It's generally, especially on the northern side, not the nicest place to be. We want to solve that. So we're intending to activate the frontages, and we're intending to deliver significant improvements in landscape. There will be urban greening throughout our proposals, a substantial improvement in biodiversity through net gain. And we will be setting out further detail of our plans for the public realm within the application. A significant component is the linear park on East Road, at the south of the site, which will really enhance the area, as John was just mentioning, in front of the cinema.
Can I just add on that slide that Jonathan had up earlier, the changes to the bus lane on East Road are based on a design that the county had already designed before the acquisition of the scheme. So that was already set in stone. And so what we've done is to work with that and make sure we take that into account in what we do. So that was a design that was already decided by Cambridge County for the highways. It's not something that new that we've created. When we talk about science and technology and labs, there's always a lot of confusion about that. People want to know a little bit more about what that is. So one of the key things about this scheme is not just a singular block that is just let to one company that could be AstraZeneca or somebody else. This is meant to provide a variety of different spaces, whether that's for small independent startups, small and medium-sized businesses, or the more established national or even global companies. And the key thing is there that we need and we want there to be that mix between small, medium and large businesses, so there can be some synergies between them and they can maybe share ideas and collaborate. So that's quite fundamental to this whole project. It's really important for us to have lots of new jobs created. There could be thousands of new jobs created. And there are a couple of important points about that. People typically think that science and technology jobs are generally aimed at people with a PhD, people that are doctors. But what we want to do here is have jobs at all levels, because all of these new businesses need support services. They need junior staff, admin staff, etc. So we want the full array of people from all levels of education to be able to work here, not just an exclusive group of people that are highly educated and highly intellectual. So this does need to allow for jobs for all, including during the construction phase as well, trying to encourage that some of the trades come from the local area. The other important thing about jobs here and the creation of those jobs is a lab space or technology space isn't so easy to replicate at home. So we all know that during COVID, there's been a big trend of people working from home because they can. They just turn on a computer, work from home and do calls like this via Zoom or Teams, etc. And the important part for a lab or tech role is you have to be at the office. And if you have to be at the office, you need to go somewhere to get your lunch, to go and pick up a basket shop, to go and get anything else. So having several thousand people on the doorstep in that area should help regenerate that area completely. So that's Fitzroy and Burley Street being regenerated from all of those people. We mentioned there's going to be an incubator for startup businesses. So, and I mentioned that before. So the incubator is for people who've got an idea. There might be 2 people who've got an idea and want to see it developed. And the idea is that people can rent space by the desk on a really flexible basis, come in, leave. They don't have to have a 5 or 10 year lease commitment, which is quite difficult for people. And they get the support as well from the established experts and our expert network. We're very conscious that this shouldn't be an inward-looking scheme only. And so we're already working with a couple of community groups and organizations to try and reach out to educational establishments. So there's an organization we're talking to at the moment that has an outreach program for kids in schools for them to learn about science. We want to be able to hold lectures and exhibitions here as well, where there's a space that we've identified. We need to do more work on designing it, but we want to be able to hold lectures here for specialist groups and for the tenants who come here to be involved in showcasing innovation as well. That's quite important. Again, it's about sharing knowledge and collaboration in this space, as opposed to individual businesses in their own spaces with the door closed and no one ever gets to bump into each other or exchange ideas. We've also had a couple of questions about animal testing. So there is not going to be any animal testing in this space. There are not going to be any dangerous activities, nor is there going to be any industrial production. We are really conscious that this is very, very close to residential, and those kind of activities should happen out of town. But in town, this is very, very low level science work in terms of levels of danger. So it's no more dangerous than your school laboratory, and it would look like a school laboratory in terms of the lab space. Some of the other space that's labelled as a lab is really just a person working on a really powerful computer running simulations as well. So that lab definition covers quite a large variety of people. But then in amongst all of that, there will also need some support services, and there could be some lawyers, venture capitalists, accountants and finance people located in the vicinity who want to support the businesses that are here as well. So that's really important to bear in mind. So there won't be anyone in hazmat suits walking around with radioactive materials or toxic materials. That just won't happen here. So hopefully that makes it clear. Next slide, please. We want to make a really important point about sustainability, and that hasn't been covered in a lot of detail, and there have been a couple of questions about it. One of the things that we could do, and the typical thing for a developer to do, is to just demolish everything and start again. And when they start again, that involves digging in the ground, pouring concrete, maybe digging a basement, and all of that is very unsustainable. It's very environmentally unfriendly, and it's not very carbon friendly either. So what we've done here is to look at what we can retain in the building. So a large part of the building can be retained and refurbished. And Jonathan mentioned earlier on, we don't have basements and we're not really going into the ground. We're avoiding that as much as possible. So we're trying to use existing floor slabs. It's a kind of a technical point, but try and use that to create the base of our buildings and the structure going above. That limits us into what we can do, but we're trying really hard to work with that. And it's important for us to keep sustainability at the heart of what we're doing. Aside from this, we're doing a lot of work on energy efficient plant and equipment, blue roofs, green roofs, having these spaces outside that has more biodiversity when there is none, and trying to create more biodiversity internally as well, wherever possible. So that's a really, really important point, to minimize embodied carbon and operational carbon going ahead. And that also ties into the strategy about having great cycling facilities and encouraging people to use public transport and even walking to work, but to not use the car, because that goes against sustainability.
So just in respect of next steps before we get to the Q&A, our current consultation is very much seeing the start of the process. That's the process we're on today. All of the feedback that we get will be collated, and we'll review that alongside the pre-application advice that we're getting from the City Council. We're speaking with the City Council's independent design review panel. We're also speaking with the disability panel. And we'll be collating all of that information, and we'll be reviewing and responding to it in detail over the coming months. It's our intention that the planning application will be submitted in spring next year. And once it's submitted, the City Council will deliver its own statutory planning consultation process, and everyone will have the opportunity to comment once the application's gone in. Before then, we as a team, we're really heads down, getting on with all of the technical assessment and work that's required to prepare a planning application for a scheme of this scale.
Thank you, Jonathan. I think that brings us to the Q&A, doesn't it? I'm going to read out questions. I'll try and assign them to the appropriate person, but please all do chime in. So and these might not come in any particular order. They depend on the order people ask them in. But I think the first thing we need to address is there's been a bit of confusion about whether we are related to the Waitrose on Fitzroy Street and those proposals. Can we just confirm, John, subject that that's outside the Grafton's ownership and not related to us?
Yeah, we need to make that clear. The plan application that we're talking about is solely for the Grafton Centre. There's a separate planning application by a company called Bridell Partners, which covers Fitzroy Street units 2 to 14, which is where the likes of Waitrose and Greggs are.
Yeah, and that is nothing to do with us. It's not in our ownership. It's not our application. It's a separate company altogether.
So that makes that clear. Going back to some presentations, Jonathan, what do we mean when we say active frontage?
Forgive me, that's probably me speaking in planning lingo again, but we're talking about the facade of a building, so the wall, if you like, and it being transparent, and you being able to see into the building so that you can see the ongoing activity within the building, which is in stark contrast to today, where obviously the walls of the centre are masonry, tile, and are really you can't see through them. They're very opaque, and the reason that we like active frontage generally in urban design terms is it increases surveillance, increases activity. You will get naturally you'll get a bit of light through the frontage, both in the daytime into the building and during the night out of the building, and we manage that sensitively so that it doesn't result in additional impacts. But that's what I mean by an active frontage.
Thanks, Jonathan. One question is coming in. Will there be any changes to the heights of the buildings?
Shall I take that?
Yeah.
Yes, there will. We are in the process at the moment of working out where there is opportunity to put in additional height. We will be going through a very detailed townscape and visual impact assessment, which and that's basically a series of verified views, so photography with accurate photo montages. So we will draw CGIs of the proposal onto those views, and we agreed the locations of those photographs with the City Council's officers, and we try and manage any additional height so that it doesn't result in impacts that are considered to be unacceptable. And those views are very useful because it takes into account the full extent of the height of the building, so not just any additional floor space, but also any additional plant and equipment that's needed on the roof. But on that point, I should just say that we're going through a process of trying to make sure that the plants are in locations within light wells or kept away from the roof as far as possible, so that we're really minimising the additional height that's resulted that comes as a result of that.
I think it's worthwhile pointing out, just in case people are concerned, it's not going to be a tall tower. There are no tall towers and there are no super tall buildings in any of this. So what Jonathan has mentioned when you're looking at the overall townscape is there's a general visual study of how the general townscape and the horizon looks. And so we're trying to stay within that and in line with that. So we're not going to have a horizon where we suddenly pop up with a gigantic building. That's not going to happen. So it's important to just make that point.
And I think also viewers may be aware of the two planning permissions that exist on the East Road side of the development. Those have established kind of height parameters, and we're trying to stay within those as much as we possibly can, but we realise that side of the site is less sensitive than the northern edge, where we've got conservation areas and housing that we need to be sensitive of.
Thanks. The retail side of the development, is that going to be open air or roofed, based on the pictures that we showed?
There's a blend. When we showed you a plan showing the scheme, we had this pink zone on the left, it would have been. And we have been calling that the retained retail. So as you go into the scheme and you've got Boots and Decathlon, etc., that's the part that is retained and untouched. And then there's a small square beyond that. We're looking to enlarge that square, and that part of it will be open air. And that square will be probably about 6 or 7 times larger as well than it is now. It's because we want to create a nice public square environment. That will be open air. It will connect to the north to Christchurch Street, and then it will form an entrance as well to the Science and Technology building itself. And the restaurant units to the south, next to the cinema, will also be in the open air.
Good, thank you. Will there be public toilets in this plan?
Yes.
Sorry, John.
That's all right. There are public toilets that are opposite Decathlon, and the plan is to retain those.
Thank you. Simple answer. And will there be a free ATM for the public? John, I think it's something you've been looking into.
Yeah, we are. We're talking to an operator at the moment, and we're trying to make that happen. We realise how important it is to the local community, and it was raised very early on. So yes, we're in discussions with an operator to try and make that happen.
Thanks, John. And the map we showed the blocks north of Fitzroy Street within the red line. Just confirm that they're not within the redevelopment area.
Correct. So the redevelopment zone, or the planning application zone, finishes at the front of the Grafton Centre. But as I said earlier, that first retail section up to Decathlon, we're not really touching. So everything in Fitzroy Street and that block to the north on Fitzroy Street, as well as the car park behind, is untouched.
Thank you. There's been quite a lot of questions about the car parks. Will as much space be needed for parking? What will happen to the car parks? And a number of people have said, can we reduce the amount of parking here to encourage sustainable transport?
Yes, is the answer. So we carried out a detailed study of the car park use, and we've got two car parks. One is the West car park behind Fitzroy Street, and as I said, that's untouched. The East car park, which is above the Grafton Centre itself, has two levels that sit above the Debenham store. And what we found out from our study is that 40% of those spaces are not used, and are not really used at peak time either. And so we've been talking to the council about reducing the number of car parking spaces, possibly including electric vehicle charging points. And on the point about more sustainable transport, we fully agree that there should be more sustainable transport, and we fully agree that there should be sustainable methods of getting to and from your place of work. So whilst we're looking at creating all of this science and lab space, we are not including any car parking spaces to support that. We want to support cycling, and we want to create good quality cycle spaces and hubs at the building. We want to encourage public transport, and we know about the council's plans to introduce a congestion charge as well. And again, we support that. I know it might be uncomfortable for some people, but it is more sustainable and it is better for air quality and the people who live there. So yeah, we're not going to have any more parking. We want to discourage people using cars, and we want to encourage people using sustainable transport.
Thank you. That kind of leads into the questions, just to confirm that we will provide enough cycle parking both for visitors and staff, both for shoppers and people that work there. Yes,
we will. We're currently undergoing the assessment of what is required based on the amount of space that is going to be created. It's still in design development, so all of the comments from members of the public will have an influence to help finalise the design. But of whatever we do, we'll have to comply with planning standards, and Jonathan, you might talk about this as well. We'll have to comply with planning standards, and also we want to be able to make sure that when people who work at the building come there are enough spaces for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we will be meeting the requirements of the local plan for Class E floor space. We're talking at the moment as a team about how we move where those spaces will be within the scheme. I think the general consensus is that we'll try and have them close to the entrances as possible, but splitting them up so that, because depending on where people are arriving from, and the idea is that the entrances are cycle centric, so that if you're arriving on a bike, you feel as valued as a person within the building as anyone. So kind of that could be kind of special bike concierges, for example. We intend to have on-site mechanics, and so that it's a really high quality offer and the quality of the showers as well is particularly important, because if the showers are poor, then then no one will want to come in. So yeah, we're looking at that around in the moment.
And some people want sort of us to confirm that the cyclist parking will be secure as well to prevent theft.
Yeah, it'll be a combination of covered secure spaces and also some cycle parking within the public realm as well.
And while we're talking about cycling, we've had comments that East Road and also Maids Causeway are unsafe and can be unpleasant for cyclists. Can we improve the cycle routes here?
It's definitely our intention, and as Subjit mentioned earlier, there is an existing agreement in place with the County Council, the Highway Authority, in terms of the improvements on Hills Road, and we intend to deliver that. As Subjit's mentioned, we're also looking at reducing the car parking at the existing East car park. That means that we'll have more space because we'll need less. You won't need 2 lanes of exit, so you'll have more space to create routes through, so that the environment for the cyclist is both safer and a nicer place to be.
Thank you. Let's move on to talk about the science and technology labs. This is probably for Subjit, but I don't think we have a number of jobs yet, but do you have a ballpark figure about the number of people who might be working here in the science industry?
I don't have a figure yet, but I guess it could be anywhere between maybe 3,000 and 4,000 people.
So we're talking in the thousands.
Yeah, thousands of people. And as I said earlier on, it's not thousands of people that maybe work from home. It's thousands of people that come in every day to work here and then need some support.
Do you really think there's going to be enough interest from startups and technology labs to come here? It's a question. And do you already have people who might be interested in taking up the lab space?
Right now, we haven't engaged with anyone to take up the lab space, and it's too early to have those conversations. The time that we'd start, I guess, marketing the space is when we are clear that we've got a planning consent. We're clear on how we're going to deliver the space and when it will be delivered. Then we can go to talk to third parties with certainty as to when we'll open. And in terms of, are we confident that we will find tenants for it? Yes, we are. Otherwise, we wouldn't do this. Do I have a list of tenants that would want it? No. And do we have a list of people that will take the incubator space? No. But going back to that early point about our philosophy as Pioneer Group, it's not just about being a typical property developer who builds it, lets it to a company, GlaxoSmithKline, AstraZeneca, or whoever else it is, and then lets it and forgets it. So we're interested in operating these spaces. We're interested in creating these innovation zones and knowledge zones. So it's important for us to include the incubator. And when we start, we might not have any. It might take a year for us to get there. And I'm pretty sure that the incubator itself will run at a loss, because we have to keep rents and etc. down to encourage people in and make it easy for them to start and have a go. But we think that with our relationships with the local educational establishments and with commerce, that we will be able to fill that. And in an ideal world, when we have a busy incubator, we have small businesses and we have large global businesses or national businesses, we'll get them to collaborate, and it will be some of the larger businesses that say, we've got a problem that we need to solve and we need some help solving it. And it can almost be a little project for people in the incubator, or we put them in touch with one of the small businesses who help then solve that problem for the larger companies. So that's what the real benefit is. And through that process, you create something innovative and you push the boundaries on what you're doing. That aspect of it is really important compared to having a single building that you let to one tenant and you leave it and that's it. That is not what we want to do. That doesn't help anyone. That's not our way of working.
Thank you, Subjit. I think there's been a couple of questions. Where can people see your previous projects? There's a link on our Consultation website, on the website that brought you here. If you scroll down, You can see a link to the Pioneer Group with their other assets and other areas. Subject, do you think this town centre location is suitable for Science and Technology Hub, given that they've previously been built in out-of-town locations?
Yeah, it's a good question. So historically, science businesses and some tech businesses were located in science parks out of town. And over the last 6 or 7 years, there's been a trend for those businesses to come to town centres and city centres. Probably the easiest example of that is central London, where there are dozens of science and tech businesses in central London. The most obvious one being the Francis Crick Institute, right next to St Pancras Station. And you couldn't be more kind of prime than that when it comes to location. And in that area to the south of King's Cross, there are dozens and dozens of businesses located there. So there is a trend to come into towns and cities, and there's a reason for that. Firstly, you've got the fact that companies don't want to be in a quiet zone out in the middle of nowhere in their own building surrounded by a car park. They want to be closer to the town centre because you have all of the added amenities. So whether that means getting a key cut at lunchtime, buying a sandwich, doing a quick shop, getting a tie, whatever it may be, you've got those little jobs to do at lunchtime, and you can't do that in a science park, but you can do it in the city centre. Then the other reason is that in a city centre, you've got a broader you get access to a broader talent pool, and those employees want to have the buzz of being in a city centre and have that life around them, rather than being on a science park that they might feel is quite stale because, you know, the only place they can eat is the staff canteen, the only place they go is the building that they're in, and there's not a lot else to do. So there are a lot of reasons why businesses are coming into city centres, and those are the prime reasons, really.
Thank you. Two kind of related questions here. Will there be any opportunities for the public to learn from researchers here, such as exhibitions or free talks about the work happening in the building? And will children from local schools be able to benefit from relationships with the researchers here?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier on, we're already talking to an organisation that connects with schools and younger children and helps them experiment and play around with science. So we're talking to them to see if we can find them a home within our scheme, because we think that would be a really useful use, and those values are aligned with ours. So we have the incubator, we want that collaboration space, etc. When it comes to other groups or other third parties coming into the scheme, we want to do that in a controlled manner, and we want to be able to have talks and exhibitions there and have people that are interested in those come along to a specific event. We're still working out the details of it. I've mentioned today to one of my colleagues, wouldn't it be great if we could have 52 events a year, one every week to different groups? Wouldn't it be good if we can encourage the people that are there to run an event to talk about and showcase new innovation and ideas that they're working on? I don't have a list of tenants with me that have said yes, but it's an aspiration that we want to try and push on people to say, if you're part of this building and part of this system, this is what we expect from you as a tenant, not for you to be in your space and you lock the door, but we want you to engage and also connect with the community, also connect with schools. So we've got relationships with Glasgow, Nottingham, Trent and Heriot-Watt universities. We've got a relationship with Anglia Ruskin University as well. We run incubators for King's College London. So we've got experience of working with universities already. It will be good if we can gain that experience and have the benefit of working with schools with very young children, teenagers, as well as the universities. That way we can cover the full spread. And really, in an ideal world, make science fun again and make it an attractive career, and show people that there is a route to a career in science at all sorts of different levels, and you don't have to have a PhD to get involved.
Great, thank you for those answers. I'm going to move on from science I'm going to quickly go back to Jonathan. What did you mean when you said Class E, Jonathan?
Class E is the so to take a step back, in planning terms, we have what we call use classes. So different uses are put into classifications. You may know that there used to be various different B use classes, which were all business related. So you'd have B1, which was office, you'd have B2, which was R&D, and then you'd have B8, which was storage. They were all abolished probably in September 2020, I think it was. So it was during the pandemic. And they were combined into a Class E, which included other uses like shops, like retail. So the government were trying to increase flexibility because they realised that the retail environment was struggling, and obviously at that point in time there was COVID as well. So Class E is just the classification of land use of both the existing and the proposed development.
Thank you. That clears that up. We have had quite a lot of people asking about potential community spaces within the development. Will there be community space in the Regeneration Centre, and have any decisions been taken yet on what might go into them? Various people in the chat have suggested facilities for teens, a skate park, a ping pong parlour, a needle exchange. There's a variety of ideas, but yeah, will there be community space, and has that been decided yet?
We're looking at how we create community space. Obviously, if we have a building let to science operators and that space, we can't accommodate a skate park through the middle of that, just for obvious reasons. We can't have people skating, crashing into people walking through, trying to go about their business of science. Those uses just clash completely. Having community uses can be incorporated. Quite where they go, we don't know. We've also got public realm space that we want to animate with events and activities as well. And a large part of that will relate to community uses as well. Still work in progress, still being thought about, and it's something that will evolve over time, because it won't be a fixed item from the beginning that we stay with forever. There will be some flexibility, and we'll roll in with different events and activities, particularly in that square as well.
Thank you. Some questions about leisure. Is the cinema definitely secure and staying?
Yes.
Good, clear answer.
I've had another comment about access to the cinema. So we've looked at the access to the cinema with particular emphasis on disabled people. And at the moment, they come through from the car park across first floor level into the cinema lobby. So what we're going to do is try and preserve that walkway and that route through to make it just the same as it is now for people that are elderly, infirm or disabled.
Thank you, subject. Let's talk about retail. Do you know what shops will be staying at the centre, or which new shops will be coming? How will you ensure that shops and cafes are the kind that are useful to nearby residents?
Which shops will stay at the centre? So broadly, the shops that are in the front part of the scheme up to Decathlon are staying by virtue of the fact that their leases are longer. The area that we showed as being a science space at the back end of the scheme, up and around Debenhams and beyond there, are the ones that are going, again, by virtue of the fact their leases expire next year. So John said the void rate and the vacancy situation is going to get worse. A large part of that relates to the fact that leases will expire and people will not renew or choose not to renew. So that back section will become vacant naturally by itself. So the next point was, do we know which shops are coming? No, not yet. We have to get through the planning side. We have to finalise our development, see that things settle before we can start talking about new retailers coming. So that will come on later on into 2023. And I think you said, can we ensure that cafes or shops of
the kind of things that people locally want? How will we ensure that they're kind of useful?
So we're fully aware that there are different styles of retailing, and Grand Arcade and Lion Yard is really for the aspirational end of the market, where you might have more of the luxury brands. The Grafton Centre is what we would term as being more convenience-led shopping, and the area around that is more about convenience as well. So in our mind, there's no point in trying to compete with Grand Arcade and Lion Yard and be aspirational. Where we are and the immediate area around us is firmly about convenience. So we want to stick to convenience, which is going to be of more benefit for local people.
Thank you. This is kind of the same question, but one of our people in the chat describes the kite as kind of a melting pot where the town meets the gown. How will the redevelopment serve all local people?
I guess there's a number of different ways. I've already mentioned having that kind of outreach program to schools, younger children, teenagers, and the universities. So we think by connecting there with those different groups, that will help serve local people. By having several thousand people working in that building who then spill out at lunchtime or in the morning or after work, they'll all need to kind of do their errands and run their chores in the immediate area. That will help all of the local businesses as well. And if we can encourage new business startups there as well, that would also help the local economy. And that last point is quite important. Some people will build a building and say, we want to get a big tenant in there. We want AstraZeneca in there. And we're relying on this big global business to swoop down to our town or our city and sit there in that building and help us all. So there's an element of that everybody needs. We're also interested in encouraging local people with local ideas, creating local businesses. And for us, that's more important about the local and circular economy. So instead of relying on the big companies to come there and save the day, we want to encourage local entrepreneurs to create small businesses and then in turn employ other local people. And it kind of proves that it can be done so that Cambridge is generating its own economy, not relying on other people to come in and have a landmark building or employ people. That's quite important. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you. Let's move on to just some environmental questions. What does the street to the north of the building look like once it's been redeveloped? And on the map, it was shown with some brown areas and some new tree planting. Maybe Jonathan, subject, what is the experience of that street immediately to the north?
I'll kick off, and then maybe subject can chip in. But I think we really want to address what we see as some of the kind of the constraints of that street at the moment. So it's quite narrow in places. There's lots of stuff. There's lots of paraphernalia within the street that doesn't help with the narrowness. And actually, it's quite actively used as well. We do see people kind of using those spaces, especially when in the summer period. So the intention is to improve the quality of the hard standing. So new high quality pavements. We intend to plant and to green those spaces. So we'll be putting in resilient landscaping that will have a benefit in terms of ecology, as well as kind of helping to soften the edges. We're talking about what we can do in terms of moving. So in certain places there are overhangs and parts of the building that don't really have a function, but are just kind of superfluous design, I suppose, for want of a better phrase. We'll take that away so it's much cleaner and easier to navigate through. So I think it's generally just trying to tidy that space up and to give it a new lease of life, I think.
Yeah, and I might just add that in our view, when we started looking at the areas around, and particularly the zone to the north, at the junction of Christchurch Street and the top part of the shopping centre, in our view, we thought it would be good to just clear up all of the clutter, get rid of bollards and signs and gates. We've got some overhanging canopies, just clean it all up, which is a bit more of a kind of a Nordic style approach, where we have almost like a level surface. It's a shared surface for everybody to use, and we improve the lighting to the area. We improve the biodiversity in the area. So it feels like a much nicer place to be, a much more secure place to be, and safer place to be. So that's quite important to us as well.
Thank you. How will you consider biodiversity as well as greening walls and rooftops?
Well, exactly that. So we're looking at, we've got to get the balance right between installing PVs, other plant and equipment, and greening the roof. And potentially
means
photovoltaic panels, solar panels. Thank you, Francis. Keep me in check. So that's a big part of it. The site at the moment is very, very hard, and I think we admit we're starting from a low bar, but we're trying to do everything that we can to soften and to improve the landscaping. East Road in particular has a new linear park with street trees. We're looking to have a net gain in terms of tree canopy cover, which is as we understand it, is a priority of the council at the moment. So it's there will be a very comprehensive landscape scheme as part of the application, but those are some of the ideas that are feeding into it.
Thank you. And one more question on the environment, I think. How will you ensure that water use is controlled and reduced?
That's a good question. We're trying to, as a starting point in terms of runoff, we will be demonstrating that we're improving, we're attenuating, so we're holding back water so that that reduces pressure at peak times when there's storm events. In terms of the water usage within the building, there are specific requirements that the council have in terms of they call it Water One, so BREEAM, which is a kind of a system that you use to measure the sustainability of buildings. It's a standard system, and the council require every development to deliver certain credits against those water policies. So we'll be complying with that, and it's about kind of managing and minimizing use as much as we possibly can.
Just to add to what Jonathan said, there is something called a blue roof, where the roof is almost like a little tank. It will hold about this much volume of water, about 10 centimeters high of water, which obviously has a weight implication as well. So as Jonathan mentioned, when there is that deluge, we're using the roof space as a bit of a tank to hold that water back, so it doesn't overload the local water network. And so that can just help smooth any overflows into the water network. In terms of the building use as well, it will be lower pressure or low water use taps, reduced water use in terms of flushing of toilets as well, and it could even be waterless urinals as well. So we're being very conscious about minimizing water use in the building and not wasting water. And even the landscaped areas that we create will also be used to kind of absorb that water and hold on to it. So that's quite important to us. The whole sustainability point is really important.
And just to move on to timeline, when would you prefer building work to start?
When will building start? Well, I guess if we start with the submission in the spring, our aspiration is that we get planning permission by the kind of summer next year, maybe late summer next year. There's quite a lengthy process from once you get consent. So there's a tender process. There will inevitably be planning conditions that we need to kind of do detailed design work on. Drawing the detailed design work itself takes a long period of time. So I think we'll probably be looking to start, I would say, well, it's going to be towards the middle of 24 at the earliest, I think, subject, and then completion is targeting 26.
That's a good kind of overall outline. When we get further along the design and finalizing the design, so we know what the different elements are, when we start talking to contractors and deciding how we're going to procure and package up different works, we'll get a much firmer idea about the program and when it will be delivered. But that's a very, very kind of high level target that Jonathan's mentioned, but we'll refine that later on.
Just also to add, because of the, as Subject was saying earlier, because we're retaining the vast majority of the building, the actual kind of the dirty work, if you want to call it that, the stuff that has the biggest impact, will actually be quite compressed and focused away from the most sensitive locations as well. So we in terms of the kind of the key issue when it comes to program, we'll try and keep that as compressed as we possibly can.
Thank you. And will there be periods where the retail area is closed, or will there be sort of continuity, or do we know yet?
The retained retail area, the bulk of that will be protected from any works. The area where we're looking to create a larger square will have to be closed, because if we're going to take a small square and demolish spaces around it to make it a larger square, that has to close. And the part of the scheme, the back of the scheme near Debenhams, etc., well, that has to close if we're going to do the works. But the part that we're keeping long term, that we always refer to as retained retail, being the area up to Decathlon and around there, will stay. And it's probably worthwhile pointing out that where one or two retailers want to relocate to the parts that we control or the parts that we're retaining, we will look at that and talk to them as well.
Thank you. Cameron, do you want to bring up just the last page of the presentation again? So thank you everyone for joining us this evening. We've had a lot of questions, we've had a lot of comments in the chat, which will all be taken into account. If you want to leave us any comments or send us any more questions or share your thoughts, Cameron is just about to show us all the different ways you can do that.
Yeah, I was going to say there's nothing up on the screen yet, Cameron. There we go.
So yeah, so you can come to the website. Assuming that's how you arrived here. You can email me. You can give our consultation line a call. You can send us a letter if you want. You can. You've already shared your thoughts in chat. We will everything you send us will take into account. Will be read by Subject and Jonathan, by our transport and sustainability consultants. It'll all be digested as it moves forward through the design process. So yeah, thank you for coming. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. And I hope that was a useful presentation. So can I say good night and thanks to our presenters.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.